Hello everybody, welcome to this video. It's another in the series on what the 2017 English Language AQA exams teach us about the 2018 onwards exams. And what I'm doing in this video is looking at AQA English Language Paper 1 Question 3. So we've now sat this exam, and as a result we can look at the examiner's reports, we can call back past papers, we can talk to students and find evidence of what were the kinds of things that students found difficult in 2017 and how can we address those things to make sure you don't make the same mistakes when you're sitting the exam, if that's in 2018 onwards. Now what I will say is this video is not how to tackle this question. I've already covered that in my revision guide, which is now available in paperback on Amazon. I've already covered that in my video playlist on AQA English Language Paper 1 Question 3. So do check out the videos in the playlist to learn how to actually approach this question. All I want to talk about in this video is the common mistakes and misconceptions and how to avoid them. Before we sat this exam, Paper 1 Question 3 was probably the most problematic question for teachers. We'd never really taught students at GCSE to analyse the structure in a short extract of fiction writing. We'd not really done that before. And as a result, we felt that this was probably the hardest question. And that came out in the exam, that this was the least successful question from Section A in the 2017 exam. And that might be because it's testing new skills. It might be because we've never had a question up until that point in this exam that focused on the whole source. But you know, it was a problem and students didn't generally do well at it. Now, as a teacher, what I found is that in the run-up to the exams, there were lots of ideas presented on how to tackle this question. But as a result, I think perhaps we've overcomplicated it. And that's certainly what the examiner's report fed back, is that there was an overcomplication. We need to remind ourselves this is an 8-mark question. We should be spending about 10 minutes on it. It's not as difficult as it might seem in terms of we're probably going to find sort of 3 things, write about them and move on. But what's interesting is there have been some approaches to this question which have proven to be too simple as well. So it's interesting to think about how we're going to approach it. Typical question, you've seen these before, this is from the revision guide, and you're given the whole source to write about. So let me just tell you as a reminder what I've talked about in my other videos, and in the revision guide I've written about it. But this question is primarily about where things are taking place, not what is taking place. And that's the difference between structure and something else. Structure is about where things take place. How things shift and move and change throughout the extract. Now it's really useful to realise that this extract is edited by the exam board before it gets into the exam paper. We found that through looking at the 2017 paper sources and then going and looking at the actual sources in real life. So AQA have very kindly sort of edited the sources to make them more appropriate for the exam. So you should be able to look at the source and find things that shift and change and move, perspective changes, repetition, something like a cyclical structure where it ends where it begins. All of those kinds of things should be pretty easy to find. Okay, and as I say, I'm not going to talk about those things in this video because that's in my videos on how to just tackle the question. What I do want to talk about is the oversimplistic and the overcomplicated approaches that have caused some issues. So the oversimplistic approach is this idea of just writing about what's going on at the beginning, what's going on at the middle, and what's going on at the end. And I say that's oversimplistic because that is actually a valid approach. You can write about structurally what's happening at the beginning and the middle and the end. But what a lot of students did was they wrote about what was happening in the story at those points, not why it was happening. And that's the subtle difference. It's not what's happening, but why is it happening? Okay, so if I just show you, for example, and this is in my revision guide, but this is an example that I would give. Shelley uses structure to interest the reader through continually digressing from the main topic of the extract, the creature which Dr. Frankenstein is bringing to life. The extract begins by describing the general setting of a dreary night of November, and once this setting is established, the writer moves to the specifics taking place inside the building. namely the accomplishment of Frankenstein's toils. However, Shelley then digresses once more to the weather, explaining it was already on in the morning. Now that's talking about what's taking place. Okay, now here's the analysis of why it's taking place, which is what was missing from many students' answers when they wrote about the beginning, what's happening at the beginning, what's happening at the middle, what's happening at the end. This digression from the main topic is used by the writer to create tension and suspense. We're keen to read about the creature, but the author teases us by switching to another topic to heighten the suspense for when the creature is finally revealed later in the extract. So that's the why it's happening, and that's the bit that was missing. And I've got numerous examples in the revision guide of this, that it's not what's taking place. So at the beginning the writer's writing about this, and in the middle they're writing about this, and then it's about this. But why do they choose to write about that at the beginning? Structurally, why start like that? Structurally, why move on to something else? And that's something that we've seen throughout this exam, that students wrote about things that were, tone, setting, dialogue, narrative perspective, but had to explain why they were shifting and changing as the source developed, or why their placement was significant. So why is it significant that the second half of the extract is dialogue and the first half is not? Why is that significant? Because that's what structure is about. So the move from a descriptive passage to a dialogue passage, why move from descriptive to dialogue was the key thing. And that's how we can oversimplify. We just find things. We say, oh, this is written, here the writer's writing about the outside setting. But why are they starting with the setting and then moving on to the inside? And it's the why that is still significant. And I'm not going to lie to you, it is the why that is difficult. I think as I was preparing for this video, I actually spoke to yesterday some of the AQA team on the phone. And, I think this is genuinely a difficult thing to get from the what is taking place to why it's taking place and where it's taking place, and how that is significant is difficult. And all I can say is to keep looking at examples. The other thing that was interesting that came out in the examiner's report was that students overcomplicated. So I think the oversimplification can just be what's going on, either what's going on at the beginning, in the middle, and the end, but not actually writing about why it's happening, or writing about language features or narrative perspectives or tone and setting, but not writing about the significance of where those bits are placed in the text or how they shift and change throughout the text. The other thing was that the overcomplication came in writing about two things, using terminology or theories that students didn't understand. This is always something that I think is historically a challenge in exams, is that you can learn about something, but if you don't fully understand it, if you don't fully grasp it, then it's a problem. Okay, so if you learn some terminology, some words like foreshadowing, or as we see here, flashback, or if you learn some theories. So I know I've talked about Freytag's pyramid as a theory of structure. You might some teachers talk about Todorov as a theory on structure. Those things are fine. But if you don't fully understand them, don't write about them. This really goes for all of the exam. Don't try to sort of blag your way as if you sort of know what you're writing about. You have to fully understand it, because if you write about something and you don't really understand it, then it's actually going to be, have a negative effect on you. So, what can we talk about with this question? Students, as expected, didn't do very well. It's really not about what is happening, but where it's happening, how it moves and shifts and changes, where something is placed and why that's important. I appreciate that that is not an easy topic in itself, but moving forward, we have to make sure that we're not just spotting things, but we're talking about where they appear and why that is important, how they shift and move and change. I always talk about that, shifting, moving and changing, because we know the extract the exam will give you will shift and move and change. There will be something like a flashback or repetition, or the move from outside to in, or zooming in on something, all of those kinds of things. But it's not that you find that thing, it's that you talk about why it's important. The effect on the reader is always such an important thing in this exam. So if you found this video useful, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as I said, do check out the revision guide. I've got 199 reviews now for my English language guide. If you look at the last Most recent reviews for that, they are all students who say how they got amazing grades using the guide. And if you check out mrbruff.com/proof, there's perhaps 100 messages from people who got amazing grades using my materials. So for those of you who are new, do check out those reviews and comments.